My name is Helen Wexler. I'm 67 years old, and for nearly 4 decades, Christmas meant something sacred in this house. My house. I was the one who carried the warmth, the laughter, the scent of cinnamon, and roasted ham year after year. 38 Christmas dinners. 38 times I stood at that same kitchen counter, carving ham with one hand while drying my grandson's tears with the other. This year, everything changed. It was a cold gray Thursday afternoon when the envelope arrived. It looked official, thick cream paper embossed lettering. For a fleeting moment, I thought it might be a holiday card. Maybe someone still remembered me. But it wasn't a card. It was a bill. An invoice from a high-end catering company in town. At the top, printed in formal script, was my name, Helen Wexler. Beneath it, responsible party. I blinked at the numbers: $200, prime rib honey glazed ham lobster bisque, artisan rolls all listed, all already ordered, a feast, a lavish meal for 20 guests, and I hadn't even received an invitation. Clipped to the invoice was a handwritten note in familiar, neat cursive. Not my son's, but his assistant's, I assumed. Still, the words were clearly his, "Hey, Mom." We decided to keep it small this year, just immediate family. Thought it'd be easier if we catered. Figured you'd still want to contribute like always. Merry Christmas. I couldn't breathe. My son. My only son. Andrew. The boy I raised in this very kitchen while his father worked double shifts. The child I cradled through fevers, heartbreaks, and victories. The man who now thought it was acceptable to send me a bill, but not an invitation. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the letter. I sat down at the kitchen table, my table, and stared at the past 38 years swirling in my memory like snow through a window. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was about erasure. I had become invisible in the very home where I once mattered most. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake listening to the hum of the old radiator and the wind brushing past the eaves. Memories rustled through me like brittle leaves. I thought of the Christmases when Andrew was a child, the way his eyes lit up when he unwrapped a new toy train, the way he'd cling to my apron as I basted the turkey. Now, all that felt like a story. Someone else lived. At sunrise, I got up, made myself a cup of tea, and stared at the invoice again. $200. For dinner I wouldn't taste. In a house I paid for. Surrounded by people I wasn't considered part of anymore. There was no anger in me, only a strange clarity. A sort of stillness that comes when you've been hurt so many times that it no longer surprises you. I picked up the phone. When Andrew answered, his voice was casual at first. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" I didn't ask why he left me out. I didn't beg. I simply said, "Andrew, I got the invoice." There was a long pause, then a dry laugh. "Oh, yeah. We figured it'd be easier this year, less pressure on you." Less pressure. He meant less presents. We thought just the immediate family this time. Jenna's parents are flying in, and the kids have exams. It just made sense. I said nothing. "You've always been generous, Mom. You paid for all the holidays when I was growing up. We figured you'd still want to help out." That was the line that broke me open. Not because of what he said, but because of what it assumed that I would give even without being included. That my role was still to support, but no longer to belong. I reminded him of the Christmas we spent in the hospital after he broke his wrist sledding. We had turkey sandwiches and cheap apple juice in the waiting room. There were no artisan rolls or rosemary roasted ham, just the two of us smiling. But Andrew didn't say anything back, just a tired, dismissive, "Things are different now." And then he hung up. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the kitchen wall where the photo collage hung. 38 Christmases, baby Andrew in red pajamas, teen Andrew in a Santa hat, college Andrew holding up a glass of eggnog. In every picture I was there, smiling, serving, holding the camera, but not this year. I didn't tell Linda, or the neighbors, or the choir ladies I had coffee with every Sunday. What would I say? My son excluded me from Christmas and sent me the bill. No, I held it like I held everything else, quietly, painfully, inwardly. That night, I went into my bedroom and pulled out the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside was a folder. Harold and I never labeled, just tucked it there as if to say we'd never need to explain it. The deed to the house Andrew now lived in, still in my name. 6 years ago, after Harold died, I told Andrew he could live there temporarily, rent-free. Just until you and Jenna get on your feet, I said. He never paid a dime. He renovated without asking, painted over Harold's old workbench in the garage, replaced the curtains I had sewn by hand. Now he was throwing parties in that house, excluding me, sending me invoices. The next morning I brewed 2 cups of coffee out of habit, 1 for me, 1 for Harold. I still do that sometimes, talk to him in my head. Imagine he's across the table reading the paper. I looked again at the invoice, and then at the deed, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Power. Ständigen Chernjin engine sindi stem turn horns. I didn't act out of anger. That morning, after coffee and silence, I simply picked up the phone and called my lawyer. I didn't pace or rehearse what I was going to say. I just told him the truth. David, I said, I'd like to talk about the house, the one Andrew's living in. There was a pause. He was quiet but alert. Is something wrong? No, I answered, but something's changed. I hung up and looked around my kitchen, the stove where I used to fry Harold's eggs on Sunday, the cupboards full of my mother's old recipe cards. Then I picked up the phone again. This time I called the catering company, Premier Events. This is Monica. Hi, I said calmly. This is Helen Wexler. I need to cancel an order for December 24th. It's under my name. A pause. Can I ask the reason for the cancellation? I glanced at the photo of Andrew on the fridge. His wedding day. That crooked grin. Plans changed. She confirmed the cancellation. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went to my drawer and pulled out an envelope. I took a $1 bill from my wallet and slipped it inside. I wrote a note on plain paper with my best, steadiest handwriting. Since I don't have a seat at the table, I won't be paying for the meal. Consider this my contribution. Merry Christmas. Mom. No anger. No drama. Just the quiet withdrawal of something they had taken for granted too long. Me. I sealed the envelope and placed it next to the original invoice. That's when I noticed the smallest detail. The note from Andrew's assistant was signed warmly on behalf of the family. On behalf. I wasn't even worth a personal message anymore. That evening, the quiet felt different. Not empty, not sad, but open like fresh air had been let into a stale room. I went to Linda's house across town for tea. My sister, the younger one, still full of fire. She had called a few days earlier to check in. I hadn't told her anything. Linda, I said as she poured the tea, do you remember that Christmas when Mom burned the roast? She burst out laughing. We ended up eating scrambled eggs and toast with champagne. And we all thought it was magical, because it was. She smiled. We were all together. She didn't know what I was really saying, but she heard the ache behind my words. That night, I sat by the window and watched the stars come out. The street was quiet. Lights twinkled across the neighborhood. Somewhere Andrew's house stood still, unaware of the shift that had just taken place. They wouldn't notice yet, but they would. Christmas Eve arrived with a strange hush. For 38 years that day had meant chaos in my kitchen, cinnamon rolls cooling on the counter, grandchildren chasing each other underfoot. Harold humming along to Bing Crosby. But on this 24th of December, there was only the steady tick of the wall clock and the occasional creak of my old floorboards, settling in the cold. At 10:30 in the morning, I brewed a new pot of coffee and allowed myself one small, undeniable smile. Somewhere across town, a delivery truck wasn't backing into Andrew's driveway. Jenna's imported rosemary bread wasn't arriving on schedule. Their table, so carefully planned, was already wobbling because I had quietly removed the leg they'd never noticed held it up. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt awake. I spent the afternoon wrapping a single present for Linda's granddaughter, a puzzle of winter birds. I tied it with red string and slipped a note inside "May every missing piece find its home." It felt right. At 4 o'clock, a light snow began to fall. I slipped into my old green wool coat, the one Harold bought on our 35th anniversary trip to Maine, and walked a few blocks to Linda's house. Her windows glowed amber. Someone inside was laughing at a joke too silly to repeat. It sounded like life. Linda opened the door before I could knock. "I told you no fancy dishes," she warned, grinning at the covered tin in my hands. "Just sugar cookies," I said, "the kind that won't win prizes, but might save souls." She pulled me into the warmth. The living room was small. 2 couches, mismatched throw pillows, a pine tree decorated almost entirely with handmade ornaments from Linda's grandchildren. One bulb blinked erratically, giving the angel on top an odd halo that flickered on and off, imperfect but sincere. "Make yourself at home," Linda said. "We're keeping it simple: roasted chicken, potatoes, I probably oversalted, and store-bought pie." Simple sounded perfect. While the chicken roasted, we sat at the kitchen table and shelled walnuts for stuffing that no one strictly needed. Linda's youngest grandson, Ben, plopped onto my lap, sticky-fingered from sneaking honey. He asked if we could make the cookies with too many sprinkles like last year. I promised we would. Somewhere between laughter and the smell of thyme, I realized I had not once thought about the invoice, the deed, or the gaping space where a seat for me should have been. I simply existed. Present wanted. We ate dinner off plates that didn't match. The potatoes were indeed too salty. The chicken skin peeled back in clumps. The pie crust crumbled before it reached a fork. And yet I had not tasted anything so honest in ages. After dishes were stacked, not washed, Linda waved them off till morning. We moved to the living room. The children built a pillow fort, and I was christened Queen of Sprinkles. My scepter, a wooden spoon. At 9:30, Linda lit 3 fat candles and turned off the lamps. Golden light danced on the walls. She poured us each a thimbleful of brandy, Harold once called fuel for quiet courage. We clinked glasses. "To traditions that bend," she said. "To women who refuse to break," I answered. And in that small toast, I felt entire generations of mothers standing with us women who cooked, cleaned, and kept families stitched together until the day someone decided they were just background noise. Tonight, their silence turned into a roar of approval. Snow had piled into soft drifts by the time I tucked the puzzle box under the Christmas tree and said my goodnights. Linda hugged me tight at the door. "You've always been the heart of Christmas hell," she whispered, "whether they remember it or not." Those words wrapped around me thicker than any scarf. The walk home was crisp moonlit. My breath escaped in silver plumes. At the corner, I paused, able to see just 3 blocks away, the second-story windows of Andrew's house. Technically still, my house dark, except for a frantic glow in the kitchen. I pictured them scrambling Jenna, Googling last-minute Christmas menu, Andrew on hold with the only pizza place still delivering. I wasn't happy for their stress. I was happy for their clarity. I unlocked my front door to silence that no longer felt like punishment. I hung up my coat, set the cookie tin on the counter, and put water on for tea. When the kettle whistled, I thought of Harold and murmured, "Did you see that love our backbone still holds?" In my mind, he tipped an imaginary hat. I settled into the armchair by the fire with one of our old photo albums. Flipping through, I saw it differently now. Not a record of labor, but of love, freely given. I lingered on the picture from Christmas 1996, baby Andrew, hugging a stuffed penguin flower on my nose, both of us radiant. I traced the outline of my younger self and whispered, "Thank you for everything. I promise not to lose you again." Outside, the church bells struck midnight. Christmas Day had begun, and for the first time in years, I felt no ache for a seat at their table, because I had found mine right here in my own life. Christmas morning came quietly. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, golden and warm, catching on the dust dancing above the countertop. It was peaceful, unhurried. I fried 2 eggs, toasted thick slices of sourdough, and cooked real bacon. None of that plant-based kind Jenna always brought. This time, I ate slowly. I wasn't rushing to clean or serve or smile for anyone but myself. And for once, that felt perfectly fine. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected, at least not today. Andrew. It rang twice before I picked up. "Hi, Mom," he said, and I could hear it instantly. Hesitation wrapped in guilt. His voice was lower than usual. Somewhere in the background, there were muffled sounds. Maybe dishes clinking, maybe a child crying. He paused for a long breath. "The kids asked about you," he finally said. "Emma cried when you didn't show up last night." I didn't say anything. Jenna's parents left early. It was kind of a mess. I tried to cook something. It didn't really turn out. Still, I said nothing. I let the silence stretch, not out of spite, but because silence has a power most people underestimate. It makes them hear themselves. After a while, he continued, "I know you're upset, and I should have seen this sooner. I should have." He stopped. No full apology. But that wasn't what I needed. I needed honesty, recognition, and I'd just gotten it. I finally spoke. My voice was calm like settling dust. I canceled the catering because I wasn't invited. Another pause. No hard feelings, Andrew, just clarity. He breathed in deeply, almost as if he had been bracing himself for something louder. "The house?" he said softly. "You never told me it was still in your name. You never asked." He sighed. It wasn't angry, just heavy, like the weight of years and assumptions and unspoken expectations finally settling where they belonged. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know." I answered truthfully, "But I think it's time we both stop assuming." And that was it. No shouting, no final judgment, just a quiet shift in the foundation. Something unsettled now, settling into something stronger. Until that afternoon, someone knocked at my door. Actually, it was more than a knock. 2 soft knocks followed by the pounding of tiny fists. When I opened the door, I found Emma and Jake standing there, cheeks pink, from the cold glitter on their coats, handmade cards clutched in their hands. One card had Merry Christmas spelled with a backwards R and more glitter than glue. "We missed you." Grandma Emma cried and launched into my arms. Jake clung to my leg, shy but smiling. Behind them stood Andrew, holding a bag of flour in one hand and something even heavier in the other, remorse. He gave me a sheepish smile. "We were hoping, if you're up for it, maybe we could make some cookies." I didn't answer with words. I just opened the door wider. The kitchen came alive the moment the door closed behind them. Emma darted to the pantry, emerging with a fistful of rainbow sprinkles. Jake climbed onto a chair, determined to crack the first egg. Andrew stood awkwardly by the sink, the bag of flour pressed to his chest like a peace offering. Aprons, I announced, opening the drawer where Harold's old grilling apron still lived. I tossed one to Andrew. He cleared his throat, slipped it over his head, and for the first time in years looked younger, almost like the boy who once begged to lick frosting bowls. We mixed butter and sugar, the room warming with vanilla and laughter that had been missing far too long. Emma narrated every step in dramatic whispers, Grandma's secret move, while Jake insisted that cookie dough tasted better before the flour went in. Flour puffed into the air like snowfall. It settled on hair-on eyebrows on Andrew's dark sweater. He laughed genuinely when Emma patted his cheek, leaving a white handprint. That laugh, that single unguarded sound, felt like a crack in the ice that had kept us apart. While the cookies baked, Andrew began washing dishes without being asked. I watched him from the table, rolling extra scraps of dough into imperfect little hearts. He scrubbed the mixing bowl, rinsed, set it in the rack. Then another. Something about the simple rhythm of his hands in the soapy water eased the tightness in my chest. "Mom," he said quietly, not turning around. "I should have invited you. I thought." His shoulders rose and fell. "I thought you'd be relieved not to host. I didn't realize you'd feel erased." I sifted powdered sugar over the cooling rack, letting silence stretch just long enough for the words to sink in. Then I spoke soft but sure. "Relief isn't the same as absence, Andrew. I just wanted to be asked to choose not be forgotten." He nodded, head still bowed. "I'm sorry." 2 words, fragile but real. Emma tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, can I put extra icing on mine?" Her big eyes cut through the heaviness, reminding us both why we were here. I smiled. "Extra icing for everyone." We spread frosting, piled sprinkles, licked sticky fingers. The kitchen brightened with sugar-high squeals. At one point, Jake spilled a full cup of colored sugar. I started to reach for the broom, but Andrew caught my eye, shook his head gently, and grabbed the dustpan himself. That small gesture, cleaning up the mess he didn't see me cause, was louder than any apology. When the final tray cooled, we carried plates to the living room. The tree lights flickered, reflecting off ornaments Harold had carved long ago. Emma climbed onto my lap, devouring a crooked star cookie. Andrew settled into the armchair across from me, hands clasped, voice low. "Mom, about the house." I waited. "I don't want you to feel like we've taken advantage." He glanced at Jake, now dozing against his shoulder, sugar crash complete. "Tell me what feels fair. Rent deed transfer, whatever you decide, I'll do it." A month ago, I might have answered with legal terms and interest calculations. Instead, I said, "What feels fair is respect. We'll talk details later. For now, just remember who built the foundation you're living on, and not just the concrete one." He swallowed hard, eyes shining. "I will." Outside, snowflakes drifted past the window pane, each one a tiny, unrepeatable miracle. Inside, I felt the same. The fragile miracle of 3 generations breathing in the same room without bitterness. We talked until candles burned low, about nothing urgent and everything that matters. Jake mumbled in his sleep. Emma braided ribbons into my hair, declaring me Queen Cookie forever. Andrew laughed again, softer this time, as if the sound was relearning how to exist. At the door, he hugged me. Not a quick, perfunctory squeeze, but the long, grounding embrace of a son who had nearly misplaced his mother. "See you tomorrow?" he asked. "Anytime," I said. And I meant it, because now the invitation was mutual. When they left, I tucked 2 of the ugliest, most sprinkle-smothered cookies into a tin labeled "For Harold." I set it by his photo on the mantel and whispered, Merry Christmas, love. We're mending. And for the first time in decades, the house felt full enough to echo with memories yet to be written. The house was quiet again. After Andrew and the kids left that evening, I stood in the doorway a long while watching them disappear into the snowy dusk. Jake looked back twice to wave. Emma pressed her palm against the frosted window of their car, like she was sealing something shut with her little hand. When I closed the door, the silence didn't sting. Not this time. It felt earned. I walked into the kitchen, still glowing from the memory of laughter and flour and frosting. There were sprinkles everywhere on the counter, the floor even stuck to the handle of the refrigerator. I didn't clean them up. I just stood there for a moment and let the chaos be a reminder. They had been here. I had been wanted. Not used, not excluded, wanted. I poured myself a small glass of wine, Harold's old favorite, the cheap red kind that stains your teeth and makes you sentimental. I carried it into the living room and set it on the mantel beside the tin marked for Harold. The 2 oversprinkled cookies inside looked absurd, charming perfect. I sat down and lit a single candle, no music, no tree blinking in choreographed patterns, just quiet, warm light on old wood and old memories. I thought I'd feel sadness again after they left, but instead what I felt was room space. A gentle, unspoken permission to exist outside of the roles I had been assigned for so long. Mother, provider, host, quiet helper, now witness, matriarch, self. The next morning I received a letter in the mail. It was from my lawyer, David. The subject line on the envelope was simple transfer of property considerations. I set it on the table but didn't open it, not out of fear, but because for the first time I didn't need to act from pain. I wasn't rushing to make a point or prove anything. I wasn't operating from the sting of being erased. I would read it when I was ready. For now, I made myself oatmeal with brown sugar, and Cream sat in my softest robe and looked out the kitchen window at the world blanketed in snow. 2 birds were pecking at the feeder I'd forgotten to refill last week. I tapped the glass gently. "I didn't forget you," I whispered, because maybe this small noticing was how healing worked. Not through grand gestures, but through showing up, again and again, quietly, kindly. I wrote a note to myself that morning not to send, not to perform, but to remember. You are not invisible. You are not excess. You are not what they assume. You are still here fully, freely, fiercely. And that is enough. Then I tucked the note inside the same cedar chest where Harold's apron still lived beside the deed and the photograph from Christmas 1996. Not everything needed to be declared. Some things just needed to be known. 2 days after Christmas, Andrew called again. This time there was no hesitation in his voice, just a quiet sincerity I hadn't heard since he was a teenager, asking for advice on his college essay. "Mom, can we talk?" "Just the 2 of us." "Of course," I said. He came over that afternoon alone without Jenna or the kids. He brought nothing in his hands, no wine, no apology cookies, not even the leftover flour. That felt right. This wasn't about performance. This was about truth. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I once paid bills, iced birthday cakes taught Andrew how to divide fractions and dice onions. The light coming in through the window landed gently across the wood. He spoke first. "I didn't realize how much you held together." I didn't interrupt. "When Dad died, I think we all just drifted, and I let you carry it all because you made it look easy. But it wasn't fair or kind." Still, I let him talk, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had waited years to hear him speak like this from the raw place where truth finally breathes. "I wasn't trying to push you out," he added, "but maybe I didn't fight to keep you in either. And that's on me. I sipped my tea, let the warmth reach the corners of me that had gone cold over the years. You forgot I'm still here, I said gently. I did. He paused. I don't want that to happen again. I nodded slowly. Then let's talk about what happens next. I walked him through the basics of the deed, that yes, the house was still in my name, that no, I didn't plan to throw them out, but I also wasn't going to be treated like a footnote in my own family anymore. If you want to stay there, I said you'll need to draw up a proper rental agreement. Not for the money, for the meaning. He looked surprised, then relieved. That sounds fair. It is, I said, because I'm not just your mother. I'm a person. And people deserve respect, not just love that's convenient. He nodded, looking down at his hands. I haven't been good at that. You're learning, I replied, but so am I. He looked up. I'm learning that I don't have to wait for an invitation to matter. I get to take up space, even if it makes others uncomfortable. A soft smile crept across his face. I'm glad you're saying all this. I need to hear it. Honestly, I think the kids need to see it too. I smiled back. Then let's start fresh. Not pretend this didn't happen, but use it as a marker, a new foundation. Before he left, we stood by the photo wall in the hallway. Andrew reached out and gently straightened one of the older frames, Christmas 2002. Harold in his sweater vest, me, holding a tray of cookies. Andrew mid-laugh. I used to love this picture, he said. Me too. You don't look tired in it. I chuckled softly. I was always tired. I just smiled through it. He turned to me. I want you in the pictures going forward. I didn't cry. Not then. I just held his gaze and said, Then make space for me. He nodded. I will. He hugged me again, and this time it wasn't just a son hugging a mother. It was a man holding on to the woman who shaped him. Finally seeing her clearly, a week passed. The lights across the neighborhood dimmed. Trees were dragged to curbs, and glitter gave way to salt on frozen sidewalks. The holidays were over, but something inside me was just beginning. I found myself humming as I organized the pantry. I donated old linens I'd been keeping just in case, cleared out the guest room I hadn't stepped into since Harold passed. There was a strange comfort in letting go, not of people, but of the roles I no longer needed to carry. I wasn't the glue anymore, but I also wasn't broken. One afternoon, I went to Linda's house with a tin of shortbread and a story to share. We sat with our feet tucked beneath mismatched blankets, the fireplace crackling. She asked, how did it feel when they came back to your door? I sipped tea and smiled softly, like I finally stopped waiting to be chosen. She grinned, eyes glistening. That's the most powerful thing I've heard all year. We toasted with mismatched mugs. Mine read, World's okayest grandma. Linda's said, ask me about my cat. Neither of us had a cat. Later that evening, I took out my calendar and drew a red circle around December 24th. Not as a wound, but as a milestone. This wasn't the year I was forgotten. It was the year I remembered myself. A few days later, Andrew and the kids returned, not for apology cookies, not because of guilt, but because they simply wanted to. They brought Story's sticky hands and a batch of hand-drawn grandma coupons. Emma handed me one proudly, one free hug, no expiration. Jake gave me one labeled Cookie Assistant for Life. That night, we didn't do anything grand. We just existed together. Andrew helped me fix a dripping faucet. Jenna brought a potted rosemary plant for my windowsill, and I taught Emma how to thread a needle without licking it first. We didn't need a holiday to feel like a family. We just needed presence, effort, intentional love. I thought back to the Christmas I had imagined, the one where I'd sit alone, rejected, staring at a catering bill, and wondering where I went wrong. That version of the story could have happened, but it didn't, because I chose differently. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't retaliate. I simply made space by removing myself from the equation where I was only valued for what I gave, not for who I was. And that space became a mirror. It made them see me again. Not as a ghost, as a woman, a mother, a soul worth returning to. I've learned something this Christmas. Not just about family or tradition, or even forgiveness, but about presence. There are people who will always assume you'll stay quiet, that you'll cook clean, contribute, smile, and never ask for anything in return. That you'll always be the one holding the camera, never appearing in the frame. They think you'll accept invisibility as love. And for years I did. I let myself believe that being useful was the same as being loved. That giving without boundaries was the highest form of affection. That I needed to be less so that others could shine. But love without respect becomes obligation. And obligation without gratitude becomes exploitation. And this year I lay that burden down. Not with a bang, not with a speech, but with one canceled invoice and one open door. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped watering what never grew. This isn't just about one Christmas. It's about all the little moments leading to it, the years of being asked to shrink, to step back, to make room without ever being offered any. So now I offer this A letter to the women who raised generations and are now left behind in silence. To the grandmothers who make traditions but are no longer invited to uphold them. To the mothers who gave everything and were told they ask for too much when they want to be seen. You are not a relic. You are not baggage. You are not in the way. You are the reason the road exists at all. And if they forgot that, it's their loss. I don't know what next year's Christmas will look like. Maybe it'll be quiet again, maybe louder. But I know this much: I won't wait to be invited into my own life. I won't hand over my presents in exchange for crumbs of gratitude. I will carve out space, not by demanding it, but by being so whole in myself that the world has to adjust. I will still bake cookies, but not because I owe it, because I choose to, because I love, because I can.